Will Mickey Haller's daisy chain theory free Julian Lacoste?
Does Lorna pass the bar exam?
What the heck is with this love angle with Andy Freeman?
How do Bishop and DeMarco fit into this case?
Red and Red Real Reviews opens the brief on season 3 of Lincoln Lawyer, streaming on Netflix.
Ahoy, ladies! Didn't see you there. Would you guys like to set sail on this ocean of flavor?
Randall, look at eye contact. You're gonna be cool, right?
Oh, baby, I'm as cool as the other side of the pillow.
Been staring at this board for days.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Act. Bears eat beets.
My brain is on fire. I'm dying.
I am the one who knocks.
Bears. Beets. Battlestar Galactica.
When they say 2% milk, I don't know what the other 98% is.
It's hard to believe we're even the same species.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Oh my god. The microchip has been compromised.
Dracarys.
Well, here we are, episode 6, or should I say, considering Mickey Haller's heritage. And we are full circle now. Welcome back to Red and Red Real Reviews. And not only, and correct me if I'm wrong, are we doing our first revisit of a show we previously covered, but it also just so happens to be the same show that we launched this podcast about.
Yeah. I was thinking how it seems like forever ago, but also like it was 2 weeks ago. It's that feeling.
So you may even say that maybe it does feel trippy.
It does feel a little bit trippy, especially because it was the pilot episode that I remember watching, but wasn't that a half of a season when we covered it?
Yeah, it was. I remember if to me it felt like I watched the whole thing because I had not watched the previous half of season 2, but it was only we were technically only covering that second part of it.
Yeah, I mean it was kind of a treat this time just because I mean it was a little bit over a year when we did the first half of season 2, I think it was. So maybe it was the second half. I can't remember which half it was, but I mean it was at least over a year ago. So it hasn't been that long in between seasons, not as long as some shows go these days, 2 years, 3 years.
Yellowstone. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say Daredevil before they axed it.
Oh gosh, that's going back a ways.
But actually that fun fact that is coming back next year on Disney Plus. However,
oh Lord.
Yeah. So that's okay. But anyway, so yeah, we didn't have to wait too long for a season 3, but I was happy that they decided to get away from that Netflix bullshit of let's do half a season and then we'll release the next half of the season in another month. So they gave all of season 3 to us in one pop, which was awesome.
Yeah, for now anyway, being the trend. Like to me, it's always confused. It's always been confusing to me only because that's never been a Netflix thing. Like everyone else started doing it the next Netflix way, but for whatever reason they do it like a weekly release. But Netflix was continuing to stick with their tried and true practice, and then all of a sudden they start experimenting with this. I'm like, why? 5 episodes, I'll watch that in an afternoon. If the goal is to try and get people to not ride on trial memberships, well, that doesn't really. I mean, if it's only a month apart, it's really not hard to sign up for a trial on one email and sign up for a trial on another email.
I don't know why they do it, to be honest. I don't know if it's that because there is more time in between seasons, they want to kind of make people work for it and wait for it. They're like, okay, well, if we know for sure that, we're not putting Stranger Things out for another 2 years, like you're going to watch all those episodes in one afternoon. And it's like they're trying to prevent people from binging content, but I don't know.
Yeah, you're right to that point. If you're starved for the show because it's been so long, that's not going to stop them from working through it in a short amount of time.
Right. The only thing I can think of is that maybe because they're doing it in halves, it kind of gives them more time with like post-production. I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was pinching pennies, to pay an editor an extra couple days for another month. Who knows? Maybe it is.
Yeah.
Before we get into the details, I will ask you, being the queen of crime drama, how do legal theories fit into that?
Um, I mean, this is a show that I really have to, if you looked at my notes, it's for each episode, it's like a mile long. It's a novel because I really feel with a legal drama like this, and it's different from something like Law and Order SVU, where like you don't really have to hang on every single word. But with
Hmm.
this show, you really have to pay attention. And I had to note things down and even explain things to myself. So when I was going back and reading my notes, I'd be like, oh, okay, they did this because of XYZ, or they
Yeah.
did this. So to kind of explain the logic of the thinking or the plan or whatever it was, or just kind of dictating the law. The reason that this is happening is because this is happening.
Yeah, you can easily miss a lot. And we'll even get into a little bit more of like how many of those details they introduced actually had something to do with the main of the story.
Yeah, it's hard to separate the fluff from the
Mhm.
actual inner workings of, okay, how is this one detail going to come up later and affect something else?
Right.
Maybe it's nothing. So, like, I'm questioning in my mind, do I want to write this down? Like, is this important for later or is it not? So, I found that more often than not, I was like, I should just write this down because I don't know if it's important yet or not.
Yeah, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's only tangentially related,
Right.
and maybe it's important.
But I want to be able to connect the dots if it is important, because if
Right.
I don't write it down, then I'm going to be like, wait, I don't understand. Yeah,
Out of sight, out of mind.
right. So it's a little more nuanced and complicated, right? To
I
watch.
yeah, and it's not like it's gonna sound funny with the next topic, but it's not like a comedic kind of legal skit either. There's still seriousness to it, so you do
Oh,
kind of have to put your brain in that parsing information mode.
mm-hmm.
So I think I may have said this the last time, where Mickey obviously has a very unique courtroom demeanor. I think I previously equated it to My Cousin Vinny, minus
Yes.
minus the theatrics of Joe Pesci. So, what points in this case to clear Julian Lacoste's name raised the proverbial eyebrow to alert you that the tide was kind of turning in Mickey's favor? And no spoilers, because we're going to get into that later.
So there was definitely a pattern for me where obviously you know this from the previous seasons, but it just seems that he establishes himself as being a scrappy guy in the courtroom. What I mean by
Hmm.
that is there was a pattern established of he's the lawyer that is going to find the aha moment. So, for example, when he's working on Eddie's case as a favor to Haley, he's in court and basically unearths that this guy who Eddie took his car for a joyride, the guy was cheating on his wife because Eddie's like, listen, that's not the woman I saw him with. His wife was sitting in court and Eddie kind of outed him, whispered to Mickey. So Mickey was kind of able to get it out of him that, that's not your wife, sir, is it? And then I think the whole courtroom kind of gasped, like, oh, what a scandal. They're clutching their pearls.
Yeah.
So he's the lawyer that's able to get to that moment. And it's like, you don't know how he does it. He's like a magician, but he somehow gets to the thing that the person on the stand does not want everyone to know. And obviously, not to give any spoilers, but he does that later in a much bigger way.
And yeah, and like that, obviously the goal of a defense attorney is always to instill the element
Right.
of doubt, an element of doubt, and to me, like that is something that Mickey is extremely, even if he's not necessarily presenting something concrete, it's just something enough to say, well, maybe not, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like to me, the big ones were when and at this point they didn't even see the video of Glory Day's apartment. That wasn't even introduced till way later in the case.
Mm-hmm.
but when he implies that all the known eyewitness accounts from that night were from the front of the building, and he instilled like there's no rear camera around the building. So
Right.
all of a sudden, like, oh, okay, things start to think. And then another one, I can't remember the particular details, but there was something with Val's testimony where he got Val to admit like you serving the subpoena and this fact over here, they didn't necessarily line up to each other as far as one equating the other in a linear fashion.
Right. He's going to expose the inconsistencies. He's going to instill the doubt, and that's really what he's good at, and that's what lets him get to that eureka moment where everyone gasps and is like, "Wait, this changes everything."
Mm-hmm. One that is and then one to me from the viewer perspective is when because you're kind of set up to think this Hector Moya character is a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
But when they kind of have this little, they're I kind of wrote, it may not be the right word, but they're kind of having a little conversational foreplay at the prison, and they're almost like they're making an arrangement, like, well, help me get this Julian Lacoste, you know, out of this situation, and I'll help you around this gun
Mm-hmm.
charge that locked you away for a long time. So yeah, you're set up like, okay, this guy's bad guy, but it's kind of to me that kind of felt from the audience perspective like, okay, if they're gonna kind of have a mutual relationship with between these two cases, that's gonna start to turn the tide as well.
Yeah, it was a mutual scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. And that's what kind of brought an interesting angle to it, because then you had Hector Moya's security guy watching Mickey. So that was interesting how that all started.
Yeah, there was one funny instance with him with the guard. I can't recall it off the top of my head. Where like they was sitting down for lunch or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. Um, and then the big one, of course, the Cisco that they rented the house out
Mm-hmm.
for and Cisco has the camera set up, which you didn't even realize at first, but then they're showing it in the meeting back at the law firm, and Bishop's like standing by the door, waiting, and then DeMarco, you see DeMarco in there, which at first I didn't recognize him on the camera, but he's in there and he's like planting something in the freezer. I was like, what's going on in the freezer? Then yeah, you know, there's the thing with the gun, which I guess was like way before. And then when they say,
Mm.
well, what's that big bag of white? It's like, oh, that's cocaine. They're like, he's just throwing cocaine. Like, I guess the DEA agent would have plenty of opportunity to grab some cocaine to use as he sees fit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting moment.
And another one was when the judge. Now was like a big thing throughout the early part of the case, like because Julian is terrified of being in prison, and he's trying to get him out on bail, trying to get him on
Mm-hmm.
bail, and he and Mickey knows like if he puts now obviously it didn't necessarily work out that way, but if he puts DeMarco on the stand, that's going to be a big red flag. But they almost kind of set up to the point where you felt like if he could just get DeMarco to testify, that's going to turn things around.
Mm-hmm.
And when he finally got the judge to say, "Yeah, we'll do this because of this kind of uh, fishy Balboa case, Balboa Drive case," like that also kind of, even though they kind of pulled the okey doke on us, that to me that kind of felt like a pivotal point of the trial proceedings.
Right. And just Mickey doing what's necessary. He kind of does whatever he has to do, a little foreshadowing there that he's really going to do what he has to do. The way he the way he cornered Bishop in the hallway, Bishop is like sitting on a bench and he like just comes over and is like, listen, and it starts talking to him, shows him the video and really kind of strong arms him into, okay, here's what's going to happen. Like, you have no choice now.
And that was almost set up by another video thing because when they're showing the hotel tapes, obviously you can't see who the man in the hat was, but like
Right.
you kind of see Bishop getting a little squirrely in
Yeah.
the back of the courtroom. And then when he's saying that, and when he says like, "Do not show those tapes," I'm like, then we're not don't want to give away the spoiler, but at the same time, what happens after that made me surprised why he didn't want the tape shown, because if he was just gonna do what he eventually did,
Mhm.
why would he care if Mickey showed those tapes?
Right. So Mickey really had the upper hand there, and he really took it upon himself to get that upper hand.
Yeah. Well, like we said, with a lot of things to write down, details, and wondering what's going to affect the case and what's not. There are a lot of storylines in here that may have been distractions, and some of them were pure distractions. Some of them were tangentially related to the story. So, which of the kind of the subplots of this did you kind of watch and think unnecessary, or the ones where you watch and think, okay, it may or may not have anything to do with the case, but I still kind of enjoyed it.
I mean, I think for me, a lot of the things having to do with Izzy, like there was this overarching theme of her like finding herself.
Hmm.
You know, her friend is saying, "Oh, I'm going on this dance show. Like you could do it too, or something." And Izzy's like, "No, I could never." And then she's trying to get her dance school going, and it's not working out because she's getting business taken from her. So then her friend comes to her and is like, "Listen, for the show, we would love to, you know, I know some producers or whatever that would love to rent out this for a rental space." So Izzy gets her money that way, but she sort of feels like she's not really living her dream. She's sort of giving up on her dream by just leasing out rental space. And so you're kind of thinking like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? You know, why do, like, no offense to Izzy, she's a lovely person, but like, why do we need to go through her finding herself with everything going on? Then we kind of find out that because there was that situation with the TV production team wanting to rent out her space, it gives her the idea, it births the idea of them bugging Sturgos's house.
There
Sturgos?
goes. Yeah, yeah.
Sturgos's house. So, and they, you know, operated that under the guise of, oh, we're going to film this TV show or this movie in your house. So, like, you need to go for 2 weeks. And Sturgos is like, okay, I'm going to Greece.
Yeah. Later. Don't tell him twice.
Yeah, he's like, man, I can't wait to see what this TV show filmed in my house is all about.
Yeah.
So it did
I,
actually end up linking to the case, which like you thought it was like a nothing burger, you know?
yeah. I thought like it might have something to do, but I didn't. But they didn't necessarily explain how close in proximity it was to the Balboa Drive thing. So I didn't know
Yeah.
necessarily that this is because of that. You know, I
Hmm.
don't know whether you explained that well, or maybe whether it was explained well, or maybe they intentionally left it vague. Um, but you're right. Well, like Izzy, it almost feels like they were trying to keep her involved. Where it felt like maybe it's just because in previous seasons she was Mickey's driver, so it was a very consistent relationship in the show.
Hmm.
Whereas obviously she's not that until until the Eddie situation comes to a crux. So it almost felt like they were trying to find a reason to keep her involved with the storyline, with the whole dance studio thing and the landlord's drama and that sort.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to keep her in the family, and at one point Mickey references that she is in his family when you know she's thinking of interviewing for a TV show that her
Hmm.
friend
Yeah,
advises her to, and he's like, "Listen, I'll support you with whatever you do, your family." So it's then you notice, you know, she kind of becomes like the office manager as
yeah,
Lorna um starts operating with law for herself, and so Izzy's like the new office manager, the new like I'm going to do everything and wear a million hats and
yeah.
everything.
It's like
So,
your family take Lorna's old job. Okay, give me a raise. Well, we'll talk
yeah.
about
Yeah.
it. For me, I had a few. The other part of the Glory Days escort triangle, when Mickey goes to talk to Kendall, And he said like, don't worry, I'll represent you. I'll do a pro bono.
Mhm.
It was thought like Kendall would be on the stand, or there would be like there would be like another side story to her case, something, she would be involved more, and she really wasn't. And then of course Tracy Tricks, three
Yeah.
X's.
Yeah.
Um, she, you thought she would, I mean, and she was on the stand, but you thought like, okay, this is gonna be I don't want to say the red flag, but like this is going to be the siren going off. And then she gets on the stand and she's intimidated somehow by whether it was Bishop, whether it was DeMarco, whoever it was, and the testimony falls flat. And Mickey doesn't know what to do. So, and then after that, the only other time you see her, Cisco goes to question her, but it was not very clear what she told him. So, those two characters I felt were kind of unnecessary in the grand scheme of things. It was kind of like, boop, okay, and then gone.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that's why you have to keep notes because there's so many names and this person even with the guy that owned the gun store in Vegas and his girlfriend Amber or whatever. It's like you have to keep all these names straight of all these names straight of all these people who don't really end up being something that's like super critical.
Yeah, and then you get to the end of the show where everything starts to pay off, and we go back and we review the notes. I'm like, wait a minute, I forgot that happened because it never came back around.
Yeah. I mean there were some things that kind of did loop around, but you're not really aware of it at the time. I mean, in hindsight, I'm thinking of when Lorna was working on Sam Scales' case. He's the con man in the wheelchair, right? And she's
Yeah,
just like annoyed by him, like, oh, I don't know who that is. Then she gets her first client. She's like, oh, this guy.
yeah.
And
And I
so, like,
forgot about him from the previous season, but as soon as I saw his face, I'm like, oh, I know he was something.
well, yeah, you know what? I didn't recognize him, but he said something, he made a reference to like something about the gallery. And I was like, oh, he helped in season 2 in that thing. Like I did not recognize his face. I couldn't have told you who the hell he was. But I just kind of viewed it at the time as okay, well, now since Lorna did pass the bar exam, now she's kind of picking up some of the slack and helping Mickey out. And they're like really a partnership.
Hmm.
She's going to take like maybe the easier kind of cases and
Yeah.
really start getting into it. So that's what I thought it was. But to find up later, which we'll talk about, it did kind of close the loop because, they did reference someone that was in a prior season, so like a character that we already know a little bit, and it seems like they're going to bring him up in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the ones I thought too. Or it was like, why do we kind of do this? But to your point, like maybe it was something to kind of like set the stage a little bit as far as um the future of the practice, and maybe Mickey will just go to trial and Lauren will take all the arraignment stuff.
Yeah, or as we saw in the end, maybe she'll be more inclined to take divorce cases, which she actually surprisingly loves.
Yeah, and she had to assure Cisco that it's like it's okay, it's just the bad ones.
Yeah.
The only other one I thought was kind of unnecessary was Cisco getting the VIN number off. Like he had to jump through so many hoops to get the VIN number off that green Civic, and he's like, okay, well, this is like the perp's car or whatever, and then it was just completely ignored and left on the cutting room floor. I'm like, well, what was the point of that?
I guess there are those dead ends in the show, and maybe
Mhm.
that's just to kind of symbolize that when you do work these cases in real life, not that I have a license to practice law or be a law enforcement officer or anything, but obviously it's like a lot of dead ends before you find that smoking gun. So maybe that's just what they're trying to show is like, okay, all these things didn't lead to anything. These were all dead ends, but like that's kind of how it's going to go realistically. It's not going to be like you turn every corner and are like, oh, great, this is something here. And then, oh, now we have something here. Like I guess that's just realistically not going to happen.
Smoking gun. Thank you. I've been trying to think of that phrase for 20 freaking minutes.
Yeah, that's the phrase you were thinking.
So as far as the ones that um kind of were maybe more tangentially related toward the case, Or I mean, I guess technically the other way around. But I thought one, Lorna's bar exam. Thought that was kind of like a feel good subplot.
Yeah.
Um, Two, this Sly Junior and Sly Senior thing, where like you thought this was gonna be very related to the case, and then they just kind of disappeared when you realized Sly Junior was in over his head on the stand, and Sly Senior is just a scumbag for and he's not going to get out of prison and be an asset to the case.
Yeah.
And then the other ones, of course, Mickey's little love affair he has with Andy Freeman, which to me that's the one I want to have a hot take about, and then his estranged relationship with Haley, which obviously they made good at the end. So
Oh, geez. Well, I noticed when I looked at the deck for the intro notes, I noticed that you displayed some negativity towards the Andy Mickey relationship. And I was a little surprised because I think I have the exact opposite opinion.
I think it's because they focus so much energy on in the previous season their combative courtroom nature. That was very appealing to me. Like to have someone who is not an antagonist necessarily, but is kind of a friendly rival of sorts to Mickey. Like that's to me that's something that's very appealing because the antagonist in a courtroom drama is always the criminal. So to have someone that's not necessarily that, but still kind of having an angsty relationship with the protagonist is kind of a nice little dynamic.
See, I kind of saw their relationship itself as I think of it as a little bit of kind of spicy conflict. Like, you know how when you're a kid, if I'm a little kid, I remember saying about, oh, well, this little boy, he was mean to me. He was kicking my chair or something. And then like my parents would be like, that's because he likes you. And then I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, to me, that's kind of what it was, is like there was sort of an energy between Andy and Mickey that like because they kind of like weren't totally warm towards each other, that kind of drove like that fire, that passion. The only thing I didn't like about their relationship is how it was so like explained away. Like all of a sudden it said 6 months later, and like he's like sleeping at her house. And then she's like in passing says, like right away, oh yeah, I had drinks with Maggie this weekend and we talked about it. And she thinks that I'm good for you and all this stuff. And it just, with all like the way that they were trying to get us to fall for this Maggie Mickey thing, like rekindling in the past seasons, like they
Exactly.
just kind of like waved it away as far as like her, like they didn't make it a big thing, but like that's kind of like a big break of girl code. Like you have a relationship and you're sleeping with you literally your best friend's like ex-husband slash baby daddy of like his daughter that you claim to be like a godmother, like auntie to, like that's just kind of messed up. So I didn't like how they just kind of explained it away so easily, even though it was a big thing.
Yeah, so you agree with me?
I do, but I hate to say it, I actually, when they would have conflict and that moment when she got pissed at him because he kind of said something that offended her, and like they would just kind of give it to each other all the time, and he would say like, oh, I'd never be able to talk to Maggie that way about cases, or she would say like, I'm not Maggie, I'm not going to run at like I did like how the conflict drew them together because they had this common sense of relevance, them both being lawyers and them being able to talk to each other about the difficult things that they deal with.
I could have dealt with that if they just kept it as like a fling.
Oh,
Like
okay.
a kind of like oh hush hush, we're doing something we shouldn't supposed to. Not like Mickey getting all puppy dog love over.
I was
Puppy dog.
laughing though when he's walking through her office and he's just kind of, and I'm like, dude, obviously people
Yeah,
know like the way you're walking around like that. Like, how stupid are you? He's just kind of like strutting around like nothing to
yeah.
see here, folks. Like,
Just wagging his junk, showing him what the good Lord gave him.
Yeah, like like he basically did everything short of winking. Like he could have just walked by him and like, hey, like it's like, what are you doing, guy?
I know. I just like it, and I just it. I don't know. To me, it just it ruins something that could have been very good in my mind. And again, to your point, and I remember we talked about this about the rekindling with Maggie, and on top of that, they preference this. They start off this season with a couple flashbacks to the early days of Mickey and Maggie. So it still kind of like ruined that whole, okay, we're an estranged couple, but things will be okay because we're meant to be together, that sort of thing. So now that's gone. I don't ever want to see that come back again because yeah, I'm going to call PS on that right away.
I know, but it's like, and then how they left it with Mickey and Andy kind of being like, okay, I guess it's better if we're not together right now. So like, is there still hope to rekindle that at least? Like, we got to rekindle one of them. Like, just make up your mind, writers. Which one are
Yeah,
you going to rekindle?
yeah, and the way you've gone, everyone's going to be pissed off one way or the other. It's gonna
Yeah.
it's gonna be like the Shaq and Kobe thing.
Yeah, it's like just pick one, but what are you doing here? Like going back and forth between the two. Like it's not healthy.
Yeah, no. Um, I will say there's a lot of jaw-dropping moments in this.
Hmm.
The gasps, or the oh my god, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So we'll go through them one by one. The first one for me is when when they run Mickey off the road and Eddie dies.
Uh yeah,
Especially
that
because
was
you knew him hiring Eddie was a favor to Haley, and he's already kind of missing his relationship with Haley as it is. And then and Eddie kind of has this unseen backstory of not reclamation, um, um, redemption. He kind of has this
redemption.
unseen story of redemption. So to like have them get run off the road, the car's flipping and doing circles in the air, winds up on its back, winds up on the top, and he crawls out. Obviously, Mickey's not going to die, but he crawls out of the truck, and then he looks over and he sees Eddie all bloodied and
Uh
bent in half. That one was rough.
that one was rough, especially because I started to like Eddie and I did start to feel like he was fitting into their dynamic. You know, it started being like Izzy and Lorna were really close, and he was kind of like getting it. He was kind of part of that. He was starting to get really close with Mickey. And
Mm.
then, what really set it off for me, I was like, they're going to kill him when they're in the car. And I don't know if it was like the day before that or if it was that same situation of them being in the car before they got run off the road. But he he had mentioned to Mickey a story about visiting his cousin in jail when he was little, right? So then Mickey later is like, "Oh, so whatever ended up happening to your cousin?" And Eddie says, "Oh, he's not in jail anymore, and I'm actually going on vacation to them to Costa Rica, or I don't remember what place he said, next year or later this year or something like that." And I was like, "No, they're gonna fucking kill him off." Like I knew it was coming,
Yeah.
but I was like, the foreshadowing of like something in the future, I was like, no, please don't, guys. But they did.
No, Nostra binge the Gingemas.
Yeah.
Picked up on something I didn't.
I definitely picked up on that. It's kind of like that trope that we talked about. It's like when things are like, oh man, characters are looking at each other saying, oh man, things are so great and happy right now. Nothing is going wrong. La la la. That's
Yeah,
when shit goes wrong. So
just like when everything seemed good with the Pogues and their little riverside business.
right. So everything is happy before it turns to shit. So I'm like, they're going to kill him off and I'm going to be very upset. And they did.
Yeah, a completely innocent character, not like someone who
Ugh.
kind of had a dark and shady history.
I started to really like him. Like I like how Mickey was always making fun of him for his healthiness and his fitness stuff. Like I loved him as a character.
Yeah, yeah, I did too. He was a nice little a feel good type of protagonist.
Yes.
Yeah. The other one is, of course, the primary defendant in this, Julian Lacoste. And
Mm.
I thought that this was just going to tank the entire storyline. Where's the case going to go after now when he gets assaulted in the prison yard? And he winds up in emergency surgery, but the way they left at the end of the episode, I'm like, that dude's dead.
I have to confess, I started watching the next episode a little bit, but they didn't say right away, I don't think, whether he was dead or not. But when I was watching that, I was like, like I literally gasped, and I was thinking, there's no way he could survive that. I really legitimately thought that it was possible that he was dead.
Well, especially because every time we see an attack or a wound like that in cinema, in film, the character is dead.
Yes.
I think the only exception, I guess, would be Nick from Bad Monkey.
Yeah.
But 99.999% of the time, someone gets stabbed out in their gut and they're bleeding out on the floor or whatever, that character's gone.
And multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way he's surviving.
Yeah, the human body can only withstand losing so much blood.
Right.
Another one, of course, and this was obviously probably the biggest bomb drop of all, was Neil Bishop blowing his head off on the stand after he implies, he doesn't say because he didn't see it, but he implies that DeMarco killed Glory Days. And that one to I don't know whether I feel like a fool for not seeing that coming, but I mean I guess I was expecting to be holding a second firearm. But
I didn't either.
The fact that you see him visibly stressing over telling Mickey his assumptions of this, I was like, I'm just thinking this is gonna be like a full circle conscience clearing moment. I was not expecting a suicide situation.
And I think that's by design that we didn't expect it, because there was that whole thing. In hindsight, I'm thinking back and oh, there was that whole scene. Literally, they didn't have to show that part where they say, oh, is they swear him in, and then they say, okay, sir, the bailiff needs to take your gun. Do you have a gun on you? The bailiff needs to take it. They didn't need to show that part, but they did. And we're just thinking it's, oh, it's just, showing what court is really like. No, they showed that to plant doubt in you that he wouldn't have a second weapon. You know what I mean? So that you would be shocked out of your pants when he just decides to off himself. You're just like, what?
I was That was intriguing to me because one, he's a officer of the law, so I would kind of figure that okay, whereas they do normally check firearms at the courthouse, figure okay, there's probably certain people like that would still be allowed to carry inside. But when they asked the judge stops the testimony right in the middle of him speaking to ask him that. So it's what did the judge think in her head in the middle of a testimony to be concerned of the fact I'm thinking he's gonna say something and stand up and fire at someone not in the juror's box, but in the just in the general court seating area.
Yeah.
That was what my concern was. I'm why would he do that? He's not gonna I find it hard to believe he would shoot Mickey for questioning him, and DeMarco's not even there. Unless he was worried that he was just gonna barge in the door how dare you, bang bang. But that was where I thought that was going. She's concerned that he's gonna shoot someone, not shoot himself.
Right. She asked for it because it's a procedure, I think. B, it's we just want to make sure no one gets hurt.
But if it's procedural, I would think that you would ask him to surrender the weapon before he even sits in the witness box, not in the middle of a testimony.
Why was it sort of an afterthought?
Yeah, so that was the only kind of questionable part. I'm why is she stopping this right in the middle of him speaking? Because at that point he hasn't said anything to make me think that he would do something either from a homicidal perspective or a suicidal perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that whole scene was kind of a blur for me because I was just so surprised. Like, for a second, I
Hmm.
actually thought that it was almost like I don't want to say a dream sequence, but I was like, is this real? Like, is this happening? Because I mean, the way that it was shot, and I don't want to say that,
Yeah,
in
I get it.
a punny way, but the way that it was filmed, you didn't see it. Obviously, you saw him put the gun up, but you didn't see anything that happened. You saw the reaction of the people in the courtroom. You saw Lorna's face. I think you saw Izzy's face, a bunch of people. I think you see Andy sitting there in the courtroom. And
Hmm.
I mean, that was the like excellent acting and filming, the way that they filmed that reaction shot. And then, after they go to like Mickey walking around in the street, so I'm like, dude, did that happen? Or like, it just seems so surreal. And like,
Hmm.
I can't imagine, just can you imagine being in a courtroom and so like you've never seen, it's different with people like who work in the medical field, or people who are cops who have seen dead
War.
bodies and who have seen incidents like that really, alter their minds
Sorry.
and change themselves forever. But for ordinary people in the courtroom to witness something so horrific like that, like I just can't imagine.
Within a couple arms length, because I was the witness
Oh,
box is not very far from the jurors box. And to your point about the actor's reaction to that, it was very strong because it did sell the fact that if you're seeing that so suddenly and in real life, it would be an extremely jarring scenario. To the point, obviously, as far as the case is concerned, I wasn't necessarily thinking, well, the case is going to get dismissed now, but the jurors are going to get dismissed. So Mickey was worried about this mistrial situation. Well, now there's definitely going to be either at the bare minimum elongated uh, elongated suspension period of the case because there's no way you can bring those jurors back
right. Well, I
after
mean,
that.
it was just completely jarring. And like, not just a man died, but a man died in front of so many people in such a horrific way, and everyone is going to be carrying around permanent damage from this, like
Hmm.
mentally.
Yeah, we're getting very meta on that.
Man, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about all these, like, I'm like, can you imagine having to, like, obviously these are actors, it's a story, but like, can you imagine witnessing a horrific incident like that?
Not in that setting, certainly. Not in
No,
that setting.
crazy.
And the last one, of course, was the at the end, the cliffhanger at the end. And I will say, because I saw your notes, I did not necessarily think it was Scott Glass. I just didn't know who else it could be.
Oh, okay.
So
I
I was
was,
like, and there was this moment where Andy went to what was his name, Suarez,
yeah.
the new district attorney, and she says like, get this other girl off this case if you want to put this guy behind bars.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then it just kind of left at that. So you're like, okay, like I guess Andy Freeman's back on that case prosecuting, and Suarez and Mickey obviously have a potentially contentious relationship on with the district attorney's office in terms of ties to the DEA and DeMarco. So you already know like that's kind of touch and go at the absolute best. So I'm kind of wondering like if they're trying to peg this guy who's a really bad guy, trying to pin his demise on Mickey. So that's the only reason why I kind of thought that that was probably Scott Glass in the trunk.
Yeah. And to be honest, because this body in the trunk was so like bloodied and mangled, I was like, honestly, I don't know who the hell that is. So I Googled who was that in the trunk of the
Hmm.
car. Like, I had to Google it, and it took me a couple articles to figure out, okay, that's like, I didn't really suspect Scott Glass. My first instinct instinct, I was like, that kind of looks like the wheelchair guy, but I was like, I couldn't remember his name and I wasn't quite sure. But yeah, it ended up being Sam Scales. So it's the wheelchair con man. So yeah, I mean, I again, I kind of saw that coming. When he gets pulled over, I was like, great, they're going to frame him for something. You know, when he asks the officer, "Oh, officer, why are you pulling me over?" and the officer like brushes him off, I was like, "Oh shit, they're framing him for something."
Yeah.
And then when he was like, "Sorry, I'm going to have to open the trunk. Like, step over there, sir." I was fearing it was going to be someone he like really loved or cared for dead in the trunk. I thought it was going to be Andy. I thought it was going to be Maggie, Haley, you know, somebody, or somebody from his team, you know, Lorna, Cisco, Izzy. I thought anyone was fair game. So to be honest, it sounds terrible, but I was relieved that it was only Sam Scales, this, you know, dreadful con man,
The
not
trend,
somebody
yeah.
he like really cared for. But obviously, it does present a problem because they're completely framing him for something he didn't do.
Yeah, and it being Scales, it seems so petty because like he's just a guy that sits out in front of a Walmart with, random Ponzi schemes kind of. I'm like you're trying to like if it was someone of emotional attachment, that would almost make it more of a pivotal moment to try and burn him as opposed to somebody that the system probably doesn't give two hoots about.
I think it's the point that whoever framed him knows that there is a motive because
Mhm.
at one point when I think like Lorna is talking to Sam Scales, or like I think they're both, her and Mickey are with Sam Scales and they're talking about the case or something, and Mickey's like, dude, you still owe us money.
Yeah,
And Sam Scales is talking about all these different cons that he's running or something. Oh well, I owe these people money too. So the people
hmm
who are framing him are obviously going to say, "Look, Mickey Haller had a motive.
yeah,
He owed Mickey Haller $100,000 or whatever it is." So that's what they're. It's like they have actual things to use to frame him for, and that's what really worries me about season 4.
yeah. It's almost like a retaliation for extortion or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that made me think like it was someone related to more the legal system is because the cop is obviously acting out of line. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you can't just open the trunk. You can't just get him, pull him out and, at first make you think, okay, it's a mistake because I'm missing the plate. So I was like, at first, like something like this cop is getting instruction to do something to Mickey that's obviously not okay by the law. So that was the only reason I was thinking maybe it's something kind of legally related.
Well, he's a dirty cop for sure. So it's
Yeah,
it's like you're wondering who he's working for and why is he doing this.
who paid him off?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, on a lighter note, um, much lighter than that, obviously. So whether it's legal or Mickey himself, there's always a funny or profound quote in this show. The first one for me is when he sets himself up to be assaulted by that kind of drug lord guy to get the case dismissed. And he walks out and Eddie's, sees the blood. He's like, "Oh my God, Mr. Holler, what's going on?" He's like,
Mm.
"It's an occupational hazard. That's why it pays to keep a fresh suit in the trunk." And he's over there. He opens the back hatch, just changes his clothes. So I got a little kick out of that one.
Yeah, that was funny.
Another one is when Mickey and Bishop are having a stat over the past, and Mickey's like, "You still think you're the good guy? At least I admit when I'm coloring outside the line." Which
Is
to me
this is
was,
this
uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
to me was almost a little bit of foreshadowing to our next topic because it's like really Mickey admits when he's coloring outside the line.
Yeah, do you? Yeah, this was when they were like kind of facing off in the bathroom, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was very early in the season,
Yeah.
or not very early, but early-ish.
Yeah.
um, Another one, of course, Mickey is always leaning on legal for some type of premonitious type of word of wisdom, and legal is after he sees Cisco's tapes. He's like, he's trying to be like Mickey. This is a big deal. This is a bad thing. So he says, if you're gonna go for him, you better not miss.
Mm.
Um, and then of course at the end, just having a little a little bit of jovial moment when Mickey says, "You know, I'm gonna take Lorna's advice. I'm going on vacation. You're a lawyer now. You're in charge of the practice. Like, take any case you want. Just don't do anything I wouldn't do." And she's like, "Oh, so I can pretty much do anything."
Yeah, I wrote down a million Lorna quotes or funny moments. I mean, there were so many for me. She's just so funny. She's probably my favorite character. I did have a couple legal ones, and I think uh these were both kind of towards the end when legal was really starting to get scared by what was happening to Mickey with security and people dying and getting hurt, and legal says to him, if you want to represent outlaws, you have to be an outlaw. And then criminals with badges are the worst of all. Saying that if you're going to tangle with these dirty members of law enforcement, like, you got to watch out because they're going to have the upper hand every time. And then the Lorna ones, there were so many. Again, just the little moments with her. I love her dog, Winston the dog, and her little asides to people about him, and saying how they have to find a house because of the neighbors pot smoke goes in and Winston the dog gets high, all that stuff. And then when she says to Eddie, there's a time when I think Izzy brings in a bunch of food or something, and Eddie's kind of eyeing the table of like pastries and stuff. And so Lorna says, "You're a walking bicep, just eat a carb." So he goes over there and grabs like one, and he's feeling kind of awkward about it, but she's like, "Dude, like, who cares? Grab a carb." And then I was laughing because I've always thought that this was a weird word, but Lorna's talking to Izzy about how weird the word subpoena is. And she's like, it should be illegal. Like, why would it be spelled that way? Like, saying how awkward of a word it is. And it is weird because I always remember how to spell it is Sapona, which doesn't make any sense.
Sapona. Just have to change your cadence a little bit.
Yeah. And then I laughed when they have a dinner to celebrate Lorna passing the bar, and Mickey gives her a little pocket constitution, and she kind of gets emotional for a second, like,
I
starts
know what you're
tearing up,
talking
and she
about.
goes, "I always wanted a pocket-sized constitution." It's just like that moment of, relatable. I just passed the bar. I'm a law person with a law mind, and thinking about like that's her dream to have a pocket-sized constitution is funny.
And the fact that she opens it up and she sees him signing her offer letter, and she's like, "Mickey, I know your books. Are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Give me a pen. Give me a pen. I want to gotta sign this before he realizes what he did." The only other funny Lorna.
Yeah, go ahead.
The only other funny Lorna moment I could think of is when Izzy is I think she's probably at the dance studio or whatever. So Lorna goes to pick up Mickey, and she's driving her little Mini Cooper, and Mickey gets in and he goes like, "How does Cisco fit in here?"
Yeah, that was great. And she was so like, she was laying the smack down with him, like really keeping him in line. She's like, "Whatever, you got to get there somehow. So I'm driving." Like,
Yeah.
So bossy to him.
Chop.
Yeah,
You're not going to drive yourself. You got a case.
Oh yeah, she goes, "Andale, come on, let's go."
Yeah. Now the big moment, the big elephant in the room to me is Mickey. We know he has some strange tactics in the courtroom, and he obviously, like, when he has the vision with his father, he's deciding to kind of find some way to kind of skate around the law to get this case win. And I'm not totally sure whether he forged Julian's signature or he just kind of like, because they show a shot of Julian's hand, like, did he kind of like pick up Julian's hand and put a pen in his hand and like sign Julian's signature for him? So like that, and I'm watching and I'm looking like, I don't know how I feel about that. This is gonna get you disbarred.
I was really not sure what was the actual truth, and like we don't really know, do we?
No, and they're on they got David on the test. I saw you wrote that something about David before, and they put him in the witness box, and he's just like, I swear to tell the whole truth, the whole truth. I was like, he's gonna force this man to perjure himself.
Yeah, and you know what? Obviously we don't know for a fact, but the way I think about it, I think he did forge the signature. I don't think Julian was up to it personally. Physically, I don't think he was, but there was that moment when they're outside Julian's room and Mickey's like, I'm gonna try. Like, this is all I got. He's like, we can't afford to have this go to a mistrial. We need to keep this going. So David literally says to him, do what you have to do. And so I took that as, David was saying that he would support whatever had to happen so that they could continue the trial. So what I think is that he did forge the signature and that David agreed to, so it looks more legit, I will testify for you. Like, I will do whatever I need to do to ensure that this goes on.
I will agree to perjure myself.
Yeah, and you know how he was asked, sir, do you know, by Forsyth, do you know what the punishment is for lying about that? And he's like, yeah. He's like, no, I do not. And he's like, well, and in case you're wondering, it's like 4 years, in jail. And David's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not lying. Like, so
Yeah.
I think it definitely. I think it definitely was a forgery, but that David was there to back it up. And David also was in the mind of like, let's do what we got to do.
Yeah, let's get this guy out. I mean, ultimately, it may not have even mattered because Bishop implicated DeMarco anyway, so ultimately it didn't even matter. But I'm still sitting there like gritting my teeth the whole time, like, I don't like this.
I know, and I do everything by the book. I don't believe in kind of skirting around morals and things like that. And I don't think it was right to do that. But I mean, it did change the outcome of the case, and a mistrial would have set things back for sure. And I mean, I guess he did what he had to do. Like, I don't know if I agree with that, but I mean, at least that's what I believe, because we don't know for a fact what happened.
Right. Well, we believe in doing what we have to do, and we will make sure I'm sure Mickey is not going to be going to jail at least right away, because we're going to have to find out how he defends himself from this murder in the trunk. If you enjoy listening to our show, we would greatly appreciate 5 stars on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts, where you can also listen to us on iHeartRadio as well if you're on the go. If you like seeing our ravenous, fiery red hair, you can tune into YouTube and Rumble as well. Follow us on social media. She is Binge the Ginge. That is dots between the words on Instagram and all one word on TikTok. And I am Nutmeg 2 Palmetto. That is the number 2 on both of those platforms. For episode 7 of season 2, we are getting our foreign policy on to try and solve the world's problems, at least vicariously, through Kerry Russell and Rufus Sewell in season 2 of The Diplomat on Netflix. Back to the Netflix well. It got up a lot of claim the first time around and left us on a heck of a cliffhanger. So let's see if they can bring home the bacon this time around. Until that very next real review, Red and Red are signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
No. Try not. Do. Or do not.
Because I don't want those scrubs.
Let the dogs out, like, who let the dogs out? Who?
Who brought this guy along?
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Peace! Why are you son of a... You did. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Hey,
Not funny anymore. TLC references.
still nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night, we will not vanish without a fight, we're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.